I'm just grateful that you could join me, and hopefully we will be able to do this in person again real soon. So campus research, in a nutshell, what is it? It is your comprehensive, easy-to-use research platform that enables you to search the law, business information, news, and international legal content, and also international news sources. So up on the screen, if you wanted to take the time to read that, I'm gonna share with you some brochures following today's training that hopefully you can send out to everyone, Joy. But again, this just gives you a nutshell of what campus research covers. Obviously, with the name Westlaw in our title, that's what most folks think of when they think of Westlaw campus research. They think of the law. That has always been the bread and butter of Westlaw. That's the foundation of this product. But through the years, it has expanded, and our parent company is Thomson Reuters. So you all may recognize the Reuters name in that, and that is obviously the international news source. So Reuters Media is one of the oldest existing news and financial data providers. So that's why we're able to provide such a broad wealth of information for your students to access. And as you can imagine, there are obvious use cases when people need to research the law, but you know, truly for undergraduate students, I love doing these kind of trainings because legal research is something, and the law is something that really truly does intersect with every academic discipline. So whether you are a business student, maybe you're in marketing, accounting, economics, the obvious political science students, pre-law, criminal justice. Again, it's just, there's so many applications for this. You could be in health sciences. It's just, the list goes on and on. But what is really nice about having access to a service like Westlaw Campus Research is it gives you as the student or the professor who's doing that scholarly research the ability to really get a 360-degree view of the issues that you're researching. So you may be coming into our platform to do, you know, to research for a class assignment, write a term paper. Perhaps you are needing our business information because you are interested in researching a company that you may want to go work for one day, or you're about to interview with them. So, you know, there are just so many applications. Maybe you are in a language program and you want to be able to read sources in the native language. We do have access to newspapers in the native language in Westlaw Campus Research. So again, and I'll go over this live in a second, but this is just a screenshot showing you access, for example, to our business content and some of the international content we have, which I just outlined. So there's a little bit of something in here for everyone. And then you'll see that the other amazing thing about Westlaw Campus Research is it's truly an easy platform for students, librarians, professors, anybody to get in here and research. You are giving people access to a tool that has essentially been stripped down in several ways for undergraduate students. So this platform, Westlaw, is something that obviously, you know, we have businesses and law firms and state agencies and, you know, law departments across the world that have access to Westlaw for the legal material. We give your students access to that same legal material, but then we also strip it down into a way that is just very easy for them to understand. And I think that is just, you know, kind of remarkable that you can go in and get access to this great content, but there's also helpful guides to help you along when you don't really necessarily have that legal context as an undergraduate student. So before I go live into the system, I did want to put up on the screen this Excel sheet, if you will, that shows you sort of a breakdown of how the schools in Georgia have subscribed to campus research. So as I mentioned, there's really four main categories that you would want to access in a campus research plan. There's the legal content, we have our news content, the business content, and international. So depending on which category you fall in, the University System of Georgia schools are going to have access to our legal content and our international content. Abraham Baldwin kind of stripped itself away and they decided they just wanted everything. So you guys, if anybody is on the line from Abraham Baldwin, you have access to everything. Same thing for the technical colleges. And then you can see AMPALS and GPALS schools. You have access to all the content except for the international content. So I know it gets a little confusing. And again, I'm happy to share this resource with you so you can understand fully what you have access to in your specific school. All right, so we're going to go live into the system now.
One thing, Stephanie, we can see the box, right?
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Are you seeing the full screen now?
Yes, it's good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that feedback. And if at all you can't hear me or something throughout, feel free to just shout out. Okay, so I did want to share, Joy, you had asked if any of us had information pertaining to the coronavirus, and obviously, as you can imagine, being a data supplier for the law, we are at the forefront of this pandemic in the sense that every time a state agency or the federal government issues a new law or regulation is passed, we are really doing everything that we can to bring this information to our customers as quickly as possible. So I will send you an email, like I said, following this training, and there's going to be a link at the bottom of the email that gives you access to our coronavirus resource center, which is what I have up on the screen right now. And it really breaks it down for you by giving you access to recent news stories, and then you can use the tabs at the top of the screen. But again, it's going to give you things like how to respond to various regulations. Obviously, that Families First Coronavirus Response Act, everybody's kind of trying to figure out how this affects them personally. We also have a federal legislative tracker, which this is really giving you access to a lot of information that's available on our law plans that a lot of law departments have access to. But we work with a partner that tracks legislation, and they really do a good job of telling you how predictable it is that a certain piece of legislation might pass, but we've also done a good job of tracking all the legislation that surrounds coronavirus. So again, there's just a lot of good resources in here, so feel free to take a look at them. A lot of them are free. Some of this content are things that you just wouldn't even find in a campus research plan. So again, it's really nice if you have a centralized place where you want to share this link on your university's websites, feel free to do so. This is a lot of good free content that is constantly being updated. And then Joy, you had also asked when we were going to be doing this live in person if we had any information on our accessibility statement. I am also going to share this document that you see that just shows how Westlaw conforms to accessibility standards under this federal regulation for electronic and information technology accessibility. So there's just various ways that we try to make the platform more accessible to those with disabilities. So you may want to take a look at this. And I will show you as well on the bottom of any Westlaw page. So right now we are in the Westlaw Campus Research Platform. There's going to be an accessibility statement right there on the bottom of the screen too that you can always access. And then just real quick, I'm going to share with you a brochure. So if you have a user guide, essentially, it's a 40-page guide that pretty much covers everything that we're going to talk about today in the training, but a nice desk reference to have. So again, if you want to share or link any of these resources to your campus websites, feel free to do that, your library website perhaps. And then I have a quick start guide that just gives you, a 4-page cliff notes of how to get started doing searches in campus research. Then one pertaining to business content and international content. So I am going to send y'all home, if you will, with a lot of resources, but I think that they will be helpful. So just, obviously use what you need. And if you need anything shipped to you or your schools directly, I'm more than happy to do that as well. So you'll have my contact information after this training. And if you ever need any kind of marketing materials or flyers or training guides, I'm more than happy to provide that. So, all right. So there's we're done with the housekeeping, and now let's get to the good stuff. Okay, so hopefully you are back looking at the Westlaw Campus Research homepage. So again, like I said at the beginning, we really try to strip down this platform to make it just what your students need. So can they come in and get their legal research quickly? Can they understand what they're looking at? Can they access the international materials, the news materials, the company, the business information? It's all right there on the home screen. So if you want to come in and access the legal content, it's obviously going to be these first links here on the left. Then in the background, be sure to check out the federal materials. So it's going to give you access to all the federal case law, statutes, regulations, state materials. You may want to make sure you can reference the Georgia materials in particular, obviously. It's going to give you access to all the case law, statutes, regulations, and then, oops, I apologize. Did not mean to minimize that. Other way. Okay. Secondary sources. So let me just pause here real quick. When we talk about the law, we talk about it in terms of primary law and secondary law. Primary law is going to refer to research in case law and statutes. So what has been passed down by a judge and written into law, and then same thing for statutes. So what has the legislature passed, and there you can find the Georgia Code. Secondary law, or secondary sources as it's sometimes referred to, is going to be things like analytical content. So things like treatises, legal encyclopedias, horn books, basically almost like a Cliff Notes version of how did somebody interpret the laws that were passed. So I will say when I'm doing a lot of these campus research trainings, I tend to find that students in an undergraduate setting, they tend to gravitate more towards our secondary sources than even our primary resources. And that's simply because they don't have necessarily the legal background, but they want to understand for their term papers or whatever it is. Maybe they're in a journalism class learning about freedom of speech, and they want to understand how a case applies to the topic that they are researching and writing a paper on. So where better to start than the secondary sources? And in there you can find things like articles that it's taken a legal scholar an average of 6 months to write, where they have gone in and analyzed a case and basically stripped it down and giving you some good context of what that case means in everyday setting, or same thing for the statutes. So again, going into the secondary sources, you're going to be able to find some resources that really allow you to understand what the law means, because someone else has already done the research and the studies for you. So just keep that in mind, that the secondary sources are very valuable. Okay, so let me go back to the home screen. Anytime you want to go back, just click the logo in the top left corner, and then we're back where we started. All right, so we are going to start today covering the legal content, and then we'll dive into some of the other features. So for starters, what makes Westlaw, the legal side of this, so powerful is we have WestSearch. Now, what is WestSearch? It's basically the legal search engine that's running in the background when you run searches. So if you can remember just one thing from today's training, let it be this. Basically, when you come in and run a search, and it doesn't matter what you're searching for, it could be the law, it could be businesses, it could be the news, or our international content. If you just come up to this search bar, think of that as your global search bar. That could be like your Yahoo, your Google. And as you see in the gray text there, enter terms, citations, databases, anything. It truly means what it says. So you can come in and let's say you're doing coursework on civil rights issues, and I'm going to type in the words prisoners exposed to secondhand smoke. Okay, all I need to do is put in my plain language, and then on the right side here you see where it says all federal. You just need to click anywhere in that white banner and you can change it to a jurisdiction that is relevant for your research. So if you want it specific to Georgia law, click on Georgia. You get the gist. You can select up to 3 boxes at one time, so that could give you access to all states, all federal. But again, I just wanted you to be aware that's how you change it. And then what will happen when I click this orange search button is essentially Westlaw is going to canvas all of these categories that are listed down here below, and it's going to pull forth relevant content because West Search is running in the background, and it's looking at all the proprietary content that makes Westlaw such a powerful legal research provider. Things like our key site, our West key number system, and actually, before I run that search, I'm going to click on the tools as well because I want to show you. This is the foundation of American law. So if you were just starting to run a search in Westlaw, going into the West key number system is essentially the index of how you could find case law and statutes on any topic out there that was ever decided in a court of law. So before we even had the internet, we had a reporter system over 140 years ago that every single time a case was decided or a statute was passed, all those topics at play were classified to a section of the key number system. Think of this like the Dewey Decimal System, but for legal research. So, you go into a library and using the Dewey Decimal System, all the books on travel are going to be in a certain section. All the books on health sciences are going to be over here. Kind of the same thing with the West key number system. Every single time a case gets decided on a particular topic, it gets classified to a chapter of the key number system. So the power of this is that when you are in Westlaw and you're running a search like the one we were about to run on prisoners exposed to secondhand smoke, the West search algorithm, oh no, let's go back. Oh, wonderful. Hang on, technical difficulties. Let's play some Jeopardy music. All right, there we go. I apologize. Okay, so we're up and running. But basically, again, all I was trying to make the point of is the algorithm that runs our searches in Westlaw are so powerful that they utilize all of that classification found in the key number system. They utilize that indexing and they add in synonyms to the terms that you put in the query. So what that means in simple terms, what's going on? Hopefully you guys. Okay, so when I run a search on prisoners exposed to secondhand smoke, perhaps there's different ways to say secondhand smoke. And essentially what Westlaw Campus Research does is it makes it easier for you as the researcher to not have to understand the different variations of how you could run a search. It's going to pull forth relevant material even if the words that you put in your query could be said in a different way. So obviously that is amazing for an undergraduate student in particular when they don't have legal context and they really just need to understand a simple concept, but oftentimes the case law uses verbose language that a judge puts in there, and it's really difficult to understand how to search and pinpoint specific sections of a case. But here, if you utilize the filters on the left side of the screen, and let's say we just want to go into the case law, now you can see that all of the documents that pull forth are scored by relevance. And I know that because up at the top, I see the sorting options give me a relevance score. Now, what does that mean? Again, West Search basically utilizes an algorithm to pull forth documents to the top of your search results that are the most relevant based on the terms that you input. And I can tell this case is a Supreme Court decision decided in 1993. If I look to the next case, it's decided in 2009. Obviously, that's more recent in time, but again, it's still taking me back to this Helen case because there's something in the language of this opinion that West Search can tell is more relevant to the terms that I've put in. Now, sometimes your research dictates that you analyze something that was more current in time. So it's very simple then to just go to the sorting options and select sorting by date. So then you can pull forth more recent documents. But I'm going to go into Helling versus McKinney real quick. And one thing I want to show you that is really amazing for any researcher, but particularly undergraduate students, is when you come into this case, if you were to take the time to read this decision, and let's scroll past this first chunk, Right down here, you can see this is the body of the opinion. So this is really what the judge wrote. If I was to read through this, I would find that the words secondhand smoke don't appear anywhere in this opinion, not even one single time. Instead, the judge used the language environmental tobacco smoke. But, you know, if I was to ask you, could anybody raise your hand and tell me how many times you've referred to secondhand smoke as environmental tobacco smoke, I guarantee none of you would raise your hand. So, you know, again, why is this important? It's because it makes it so much easier for you as the researcher to find something that's relevant and on point, even if the words that you're looking for don't appear anywhere in the document. So it's pretty remarkable that you can search that way. All right, now up at the top of the screen, since we are looking at a case, I just want to review, this is kind of the format of every case that you're going to see in Westlaw. So if you're doing case law research, these are some points that you need to understand. First and foremost, the most important thing is if you are going to ever cite to this case, or if you are ever going to refer to it, you want to make sure that the case law is still valid and still good. So in Westlaw, we have a system called the key cite system. And it's basically a series of flags that you'll find in the top left corner of any case. And you can think of these flags as your warnings, and it's going to tell you right off the bat whether or not this case is good. I like to point people to the, or tell people to think about a stoplight. So if you were looking at a stoplight, you might have a red light and a yellow light and a green light. So in Westlaw, you're going to notice that you'll see a flag that could be red or yellow, and actually instead of green, we just have, you would have nothing listed. If the case is good and there's no negative citing references on it, it would just be that you wouldn't notice a flag. But if you see a red flag, it means that there's at least one legal issue in that case that's been overturned. If you see a yellow flag, it means basically proceed with caution. Slow down a little bit, take a look. There may be something negative about this case that you don't necessarily want to rely on. If you want to delve deeper into the key cite history, just click on either of those flags, and it takes you into the negative treatment tab. Now, again, I could spend probably an entire semester in law school trying to teach you every little feature to do with, you know, negative treatment and key cite history. This is something, again, that really becomes even more critical when you are studying the law. But for undergraduate purposes, the most important thing to note when you come to the key cite history is this most negative tag. We basically draw your attention to the case that gave yours the treatment that it received. So if you wanted to truly understand why the Helling versus McKinney case was given a yellow flag, you're going to want to click on the Walker versus Davis case. And then over here to the right side of the screen, we also give you one more step, one more point that draws you to what specifically in the Helling case was discussed in this Walker decision. So if you hover over that number 3 head note, it gives you an issue that was found in the case, and that is truly what is at play. That is what was analyzed, and you know where the court in Walker slightly deviated from Helling. All right, so I know that's a lot to digest, so we're going to go backwards just one step. I'm going to go back to the case by clicking on the Helling versus McKinney link. I apologize, the internet's running a little wonky. Not sure what's going on. Let me see.
How unmute people?
No,
Is the screen frozen for you guys? Not sure what's going on here. Let me see. I apologize, guys. I don't know why. It's just spinning and spinning and spinning. Let's see. I am connected, so I'm not sure what is the issue. Let me try one more thing. Gotta love internet access. Refresh.
Hi, everyone. It's Joy. Hopefully you can hear me. While Stefanie is trying to get her presentation back up, I did try to unmute everyone, but now it's sort of frozen and has muted everyone instead of unmuting them all. So just give us 1 second. Well, I think that everyone can unmute themselves. So if Stefanie, you can hear me, go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go. See if there are any questions. Sorry, everyone. This is some of the crazy things that are happening when we try to do virtual online meetings, as I'm sure has happened with you guys. Stefanie, if you can hear me, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, I'm sorry. I never even clicked unmute. You couldn't hear me at all?
No, I was actually trying to unmute people and then the mute function got frozen. So
Gotcha. I apologize. Y'all, I'm so sorry. I just don't understand what's going on. My internet is fully connected, but for some reason it is not allowing me back into that site. So
well, maybe we can use this time for questions. If anyone, while we see if that's working, if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself or type it into the chat function. So I know this is a new resource for us. And I actually had gotten some feedback from our user survey this past year, and there are, a lot of people that really welcome the addition to Westlaw, and there are some that still has some questions about its usability. So if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself or type them into chat. We'll give that a few minutes.
I'm gonna try a workaround with you guys, which hopefully will let me at least show you some of these features. Okay. All right, if there's no questions, I apologize for this, but for some reason my internet is not liking when I connect to our VPN network. What you're looking at now is basically the platform as it appears to any law firm or any law department. Like I mentioned, the version that you were just looking at was a lot more stripped down, but I think in order to at least show you how to access these features, I wanted to do it this way, if you guys are okay with that, because it seems to be working when I disconnect from VPN. Basically, where we just were was in Helling versus McKinney case. And I'm going to actually show you, we're just going to move on from that one, but if you had a student that was coming into the system, I will try to point out, obviously you can see looking at this, there's a lot more features in here, but I will try to point out, things that are only going to be found in your campus plan. And I apologize for having to do this workaround this way, but I want y'all to at least have the benefit of seeing how this can help. All right, so if you were a student, maybe you're in a journalism class and you're focusing on freedom of speech, if you just wanted to find a particular case that you're studying, so maybe it's New York Times versus Sullivan, another way that you can utilize Westlaw Campus Research is by simply just typing in the party names. So at the top of the screen, all you would have to do is click in the party names, and it should take you straight to the case. You don't even have to worry about the jurisdiction selected. This is just a real quick shortcut. And there you go. It takes us straight to that case at the top. So I'm going to click into that. So I think before we were interrupted, I was just showing you, and I'll just show you through this case, what is included in every case in Westlaw. So again, we kind of reviewed the key site history already. By clicking on those flags, you can understand the validity of that case and how, if there's anything that has been called into question by other judges in the same jurisdiction. And then one other thing that I really like to point out for our campuses is every single case that gets decided and put into our system includes a synopsis summary. So I remember in undergrad, and even when I went on to law school at UGA, I had this synopsis summary was the first thing that I would look at. And what it is it essentially is a quick summary of what happened in this case. So you can go there very quickly to understand, the procedural history is what we call it. So what happened in this case? What were the facts at play? How did the judge rule in this decision? A lot of times for undergraduate purposes, this synopsis summary is sufficient for them to fully understand why this case is important. But for any researcher, it's important to look at this first, because then you can decide how much time do you really want to spend looking at the rest of this document. Now, beneath that, every case in Westlaw gives you access to a list of head notes. And if you remember, when we started this training, I showed you the West key number system, which was that master classification for all American law. So what the head notes do is every single time a case gets decided, our attorney editors not only put in these synopsis summaries, but they also break apart every legal issue that's found in those cases, and they break them into what we call head notes. So all head note is it's a one-sentence summary of an issue found in that case. For a researcher, if you wanted to find where this particular issue was discussed, all you need to do is click the number to the left of the head note. It's going to jump you down into the section of the opinion, so this is what the judge wrote, where then you can read further and understand what was analyzed. Click on the number to go back up to the top. And then perhaps the most important thing about head notes is it links you to a chapter of the key number system listed here on the right side. So again, just to recap what we were mentioning at the beginning is the key number system is our way to classify all legal issues on any topic that have ever been decided in any case for the last 140 plus years. And this gives you access to link to other cases and other material that might help you further in a term paper you're writing or anything that you may be arguing on this topic. It's a nice way to go in and then access a chapter of the key number. So maybe you're looking for, this particular topic down here. Click into that key number, and it's going to take you to other cases on point for that issue. So again, this is the other way that students may utilize the West key number system when they're already in a case on point for a specific topic, but they need to flesh out their paper, you know, their dissertation, and maybe they need to find some more material. This is where they can go to do that. Okay, so click the back browser if you want to get back to the case. And then up at the top of the screen, obviously it's important to understand our delivery methods and how your users can actually get this into their hands. So every case is going to, and every document in Westlaw is going to have some of these things that you see here. So for your purposes, you would be able to access this search within documents in Campus Research. So that little magnifying glass, if you click that, a little box appears if you want to search for particular text in a document. The font ability to change it if you visually impaired, you need to increase the font, you can do that there. And then you're going to have the delivery options, which is this icon second from the right. So if you click the drop down there, that's where you can go find access to the email, print functions, download, etc. All right, so that's just a little bit of housekeeping. Another thing to note, if you click on this Go To icon, which is going to appear in your Campus Research platform, this allows you to jump to different sections of the document that you have in front of you. Mm-hmm. So if I ever wanted to cite to anything, I'm never able to cite directly from the head notes because that is our proprietary content. But if you click into the opinion, that is the opinion issued by the judge. So that is what you would be citing to if you were writing a term paper. And another really neat thing that we have here in Campus Research is if you were trying to pull a section of text to put into a term paper, you would just highlight the text that you need, release your mouse, and then you're going to have this option appear for you that says copy with reference. If I select copy with reference, it's going to basically pull this text with a citation attached to it. Then I can open up my Word document and paste it. So Control V, it gives me that New York Times case, it gives me the actual citation and the page that I could find that in. So it's pretty nice to be able to do that, to just copy it and then you've got the full citation right there. All right, another thing that you'll be able to find when you are looking at any case in Westlaw is up at the top of the screen, these tabs will all be the same on the platform that you have access to. So we've already gone through the negative treatment, that's going to take you to the key site history. History would basically give you an outline of where this case has been through the court system. Filings, that's really going to be more applicable for your attorneys if they're trying to figure out any briefs or filings that were filed with the court, motions that were written when this case was argued in court. But for your purposes, I would say undergraduate students are really going to want to come over here to the citing references. And what a citing reference is, excuse me, that is going to be a list of every document in Westlaw Campus Research that ever cited to the case that you have open. So let's click in there. And then you'll notice that in pretty much every screen on Westlaw, we have a series of filters that we have here on the left side of the screen. So if, for example, you were really more interested in understanding how a secondary source may have analyzed the New York Times case, come into the citing references and click on secondary sources to the left side of the screen. And then you have the ability to scroll in and select certain resources. So like I mentioned, secondary sources are really going to be those analytical treatises, law reviews, journals. ALR stands for American Law Reports. Some of the big dogs that you'll see in here are American Law Reports, American Jurisprudence, CJS. Those are the biggest legal encyclopedias in the world. And a lot of scholars publish articles in there that basically, again, just take the law from cases like New York Times versus Sullivan and they analyze them in the context of a particular issue that they're researching. So as you can imagine, this is why I say this is extremely helpful for undergraduate students because they can go in, utilize these filters. Maybe they want to go specifically to the ALR articles that we have out there. And then click on the appropriate article. So First Amendment protections, curtailment of access to or retaliation for communications on social media, Supreme Court's federal rules, decisions and holding, etc. You know, It's very simple, it's very streamlined, but another thing, because now you understand the head notes, if you click to the right column, or direct your attention to the right column rather, when you highlight or hover over any of those head notes, you can understand immediately, before even going into the document, what issue was analyzed in that analytical treatise. So this is a really helpful way for your students to go in and get the benefit of those secondary sources. So you would just click into it, and now you're in that article. And again, the delivery options are always going to be up here on the banner. So if they wanted to print this or email this to themselves, it's really simple. Now, one thing I want to point out at this time is, if you are doing research on Westlaw, whether you're researching the law, businesses, whatever, you may find, just as in any platform, you're going to go down that rabbit hole. That is natural. That's the normal way to research on this platform. But maybe you want to get back to something you were looking at earlier in your search session. So you're going to want to always go up to the top of the screen. In Campus Research, you're going to have access to our history link. So clicking into the history is going to take you back to everything in that search session that you looked at that day. In my example here, I know it's a little confusing because, again, I'm using my I'm using my full access password right now because of the technical difficulties we were having. So mine goes back for a year, but for students, because another student may come in and use the resource after someone, we wipe this slate clean after each use. So every time they log in, they don't have to log in. They just click the link from your website, and then they're given access, and they don't have to look at any of the search history from a prior user. But this is an easy way to go back to something you looked at earlier. All right, so that's kind of wrapping up the case law. I apologize, we kind of got lost there with the technical difficulties, but the last thing I wanted to show you real quick with the legal side, and then we'll move on to the other content, which is not going to be as extensive. It's a lot faster to show, I promise, is our statutes. So again, primary law encompasses access to the case law and statutes. So for you, I would direct your students to the state materials, and then they can go straight into Georgia. And then, like I said, scroll down to the statutes and court rules section. When you click into that, it's going to give you access to the table of contents for the Georgia Code. This is a great place to start if, regardless of your discipline, like I said, most disciplines still need to understand how the laws apply to their practice. So this is a great way. If you know a particular citation, you can just put in the citation for that Georgia Code, or you can type in the topic. And we make it even easier for students because in your version as well, we have access to the Georgia Statutes Index. So always direct your attention whenever you see resources listed on the right side of the screen in Westlaw Campus Research. Those are going to be additional tools and resources to help you in your research and streamline the process. But the Statutes Index in particular is extremely helpful for undergraduate students. And we're the only legal research provider that provides this service that breaks down statutes by topic. So not only do we give you the statutes index, the statutes table of contents as it's listed on any service, but here, if they were just looking for a statute on a particular topic, like abortion or any, search and seizure law, whatever it is, they're able to come in here and just search by the topic, and then it takes them straight to that code section. So please keep that in mind. That's a very easy way to point students to this resource and allow them to easily find the statute for themselves if they don't have a code section. Now, in the example I want to pull up for you today, I do have a code section. So all you would need to do when you're searching for a statute is type in the abbreviation GA for the state, and then ST, and then whatever the numbers are that you know the code section to be. So it's going to be the title first, the chapter, and the section. I'm going to go to the Georgia Code section 40-6-392. And it's going to take me to this statute, which essentially refers to DUI laws. And right off the bat, like I just showed you earlier with the key site flags, we also include those with statutes. So anytime you're looking at primary law, you're going to see the key site flags listed to the top left corner. Right off the bat, I can tell immediately, before even looking at any of the text of this statute, that this was deemed unconstitutional This statute was held unconstitutional by this case right here, the Elliott case. So if I didn't even want to go any further reading the full text of this, I could just go into the Elliott versus State case and understand, what was held unconstitutional. But again, that's kind of the nice thing about Westlaw. When you're doing legal research on this platform, we really give you so many different avenues to look at an issue. We tell you immediately what was held unconstitutional, but maybe there's something else in this statute that you really wanted to rely on. And having the ability to go in and search the full text of a document is really, really helpful. But again, there's a lot of complicated language. A lot of times the legislature is, our legislators are oftentimes comprised of attorneys, right? They're kind of like the judges. They use this fancy language that can be very difficult for undergraduate students to understand. So we make it easy for you by giving you access from 2 points here on the right side of the screen and up at the top in our notes of decisions. Now, what are notes of decisions? What this is it's giving you a listing by topic of various issues where this statute was analyzed in the context of the issues that you see. So maybe I'm looking for DUI information as it pertains to evidence, admissibility of evidence, and self-incrimination. I'm going to click on this number 76. It's going to jump me down to more information about this topic. But also, it's going to take me to other cases you see listed here under this topic, where a judge has analyzed this code section in the context of the case that they were deciding on. So again, it's a lot to cover. This is a lot, again, I'm trying to consolidate in a short training here what you learn in quite a bit of time in law school, for example. But again, it's pretty neat that your students have access to this material early on and they are able to access the law just as any lawyer one day might access it. But this is why it's helpful. Because again, there's just so much in Westlaw, whether you're looking at case law or statutes, that give you context and analysis of what you're reading and why you need to read it and how it can be helpful for the paper that you're drafting. So we always give you context and analysis links within a statute. And again, citing references in a statute up there at the top are going to be just like they are in case law. They're going to be every document in Westlaw Campus Research that is ever cited to this statute and give you more analysis and understanding of why that statute might be interpreted a certain way. So again, you're able to point your students to the secondary sources, and that's going to be where you can find some articles that really give them a better understanding of how this statute affects them or their research. All right.
Stefanie, we have one question.
Yeah.
In the chat, and I think it was related to permalinks. That's something that, like we have express links and permalinks that allow the students to access materials straight away without, wandering through a website. Is there something like that for Westlaw?
So on the version that you have, there is not. I'm guessing you're kind of asking, like, is there a favorite link that you could set or something that they could bookmark and always go back to rather than digging through and trying to find it the way that we're doing? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah.
The only workaround that I know that exists for that is if you just save the page. So if you would just go up to the top of the screen here and save that link, like for example, if you were trying to always give them access to this chemical test statute, if you save the link up here, I know that that will take you back to that section. But unfortunately, because of the security measures with the campus research platform, we don't give y'all the ability and the flexibility, like on this password that I'm logging in on, to have those bookmark pages, just because users are constantly coming in after another user and accessing this content. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions from anyone? You can type them into the chat or can unmute yourself. We have about 8 minutes left.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. Again, like I said, the legal content of this is what takes the longest to review. The other parts are pretty simple and straightforward. Since you had asked about the coronavirus resources, I did also just want to point out really quickly that if you go into our proposed and adopted regulations or enacted legislation, or even go into the federal materials and the Code of Federal Regulations, you can simply type in the word coronavirus. And this is going to also give you a link to regulation that is currently being passed, and just helping you to understand some of the things that are going on in this new COVID world that we're living in. So how does it affect you? And always take a look in campus research at the related documents on the right side of the screen as well, because those, again, are going to link you to some of those secondary sources that might help you to understand how what these regulations mean in the context of your research. So, maybe you're doing a paper on how coronavirus seems to be affecting the marginalized populations more than anybody else, for example. It gives you access to an article that's already researched that issue. All right, so that's kind of where I'm going to stop it for the legal side. And like I said, in the last 7 minutes here, we're going to quickly go into the other 3 features, which are pretty simple and straightforward. First up is our international content. And again, I apologize, I'm not on the platform that you see, but you would have access on the home screen to this link right here that is labeled International Materials. When you go into the international materials, some of the kind of things that we include in our international content for our campuses are leading journals from across the globe, the European journal, the European Union journal, for example, the European Union legislation. That's going to give you full text of legislative acts of the Council of the European Union, the European Parliament, and the European Commission, reported in the official journal of the European Community. So again, there's just so many good things here. If you were in a language program or an international studies program, this may be something that you want to take a look at. There's a lot of good legal content from all of these countries. But then also here on the right side, we give you access to our international news. So if you wanted to jump into the news, just click on the international news content and it'll take you to some of those full text newspapers from across the world. I did want to show you when you come into European, let's see, you know what, in the interest of time, I am going to jump into the international news link and we'll go into the news a little bit. But again, it's very simple to just go into the specific resources. Like if I wanted to click into just European Union jurisdiction, then I'm able to go in and access legislation, treaties, etc. It's just very easy to search the journals this way. Maybe the European Human Rights Law Review, and it's just very simple to search. And one other thing to note, at the top of the screen, you'll notice when you are in a specific category, like right now, we've delved into the European Union content. Up at the top of the screen, you're going to notice that the search bar changes to reflect the specific category that you're researching from. So right now, if I was to put terms in the top there, like maybe I'm looking for war crimes information, I would only be searching from the bucket of the European Union. So just keep that in mind too, that when your researchers are searching broadly, like that first search we did on prisoners exposed to secondhand smoke, I didn't specify which category of information I was looking into, but because we started here in the international materials, and then I drilled down into the European Union, this is one way to just restrict your search world, if you will. So I'm essentially doing the filtering before I get started. Another thing to point out is every screen on Westlaw also has this advanced search capability. So if you click into that, depending on the category of what you are researching at that moment, we have templates that your users can access. So this actually also within the European Union content, I could search for specific pieces, or I could just search for specific terms. And then up there at the top of the screen, Westlaw is going to automatically populate the search for you. If you're more savvy, you can use the Boolean searching. The Boolean technology is obviously putting in a connector between every word. This is where it gets a little bit more tricky. And again, I'm always happy to do a follow-up training for any of you, or a specific course or specific school. And these are the kind of things that I cover in those more advanced trainings. But I did want you to be aware that we do have those templates available anytime you click on the advanced link. All right, so let me click back, and we're going to go into the news real quick. So going back to the international materials, and we're going to click on international news to the right. And again, this just gives you a quick link to go in and see the news sources from across the world. One really neat thing is when you're looking at the international news, you can also access information in the native language sometimes. So if you want to find newspapers, for example, from Spain, let's say, and I want to see it in the native language, it's really simple to just go in and click on the actual ones, either in English or in Spanish. So maybe I want to look at El País in Español. So I'm going to click into that, and then you'll see all the publications, all the articles are in that native language. So this may be something that is particularly helpful for your coursework if you're trying to print something out for your students, or just point them to a resource in that native language. All right, let me go back to the home screen real quick because I kind of jumped in the back gate going into the news resources. But if I wanted to go straight to the news content, you're just going to click on the news link from the home screen of Westlaw Campus Research. And it's going to take you to all of our news resources. I've already mentioned that obviously we have access to all of the Reuters media. Again, Reuters is part of our parent company, so that's going to give you the oldest existing news and financial data provider, all the information that we have. But when you come into the news, it's also particularly helpful to access these links on the right. So you can search by a news index, but also I tend to tell folks to go into the news wires. So we have the APP. We do have some of the major newspapers from across the country. So you've got the Washington Post, USA Today. I tell people off the bat, you're not going to find things like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. Those licensing fees just continue to grow and grow, way too high. And I know that all of our undergraduate universities and campuses, they all have access to those in other ways anyway. But I find that a lot of students like to come into our news resources, and particularly to access the wires or the transcripts. So I'm going to click into transcripts. And let's say that you just want to go in and you want to see what Anderson Cooper talked about last night on CNN, or maybe the Cuomo show. So you're going to click on CNN. And there you go. I've got CNN's Anderson Cooper 360 or Cuomo Prime Time. Let's click into that one. And now I can access what was discussed just today or last night. So it looks like there was already a transcript from today. And then I can see the whole transcript, the whole broadcast transcript. So pretty useful.
I think we'll stop right there. Reach the 11 o'clock time frame, and I want to make sure that everyone that we are right on time with the meeting. And if there are no other questions, let's see, I'm just making sure there are no other questions in the chat. I want to thank Stefanie for this presentation, and I'll turn on my camera for this last part. I want to thank Stefanie for giving this presentation. It is one of our newest resources, and so I think this run through is really helpful for our librarians and educators. For any of your colleagues that were not able to be inside of this meeting, the presentation will be available online here in the future, and I will make sure that you all have the links to it. Any of the information that Stefanie spoke about in her presentation as far as brochures or other handouts that you might find useful, we will also make sure that you all are able to receive those as well. And so if there are no other questions, I want to thank everyone for attending the presentation, and I will sign off there. Thank you all so much. Bye.
Thank you.